Hey y'all, it's Andrew Reed with Mossy Creek Mushrooms, and if you've been paying attention to my Instagram, then you know that I've had a little video I've been working on called Aerated Liquid Culture, and that is today's video. First of all, I want to start off with a slight apology for being missing on you guys on videos and Patreon and things like that. I've tried to stay up to date on Discord since most people on the Patreon are also on the Discord, and doing some of the Monday night lives and such on Discord at 8 p.m. Eastern. However, I've had a little bit of health problems. Had me in the hospital overnight a couple weekends back, and just been recovering from that. Everything's cool. I'm good. I'm on the mend. We'll all be all right. It's just more of the same old, same old. So, just, need to take better care of myself kind of stuff. All of this said, let's get into aerated liquid culture, shall we? All right. First thing, why? Why aerated liquid culture? Why did I do this? Why did I try this? Well, I first read about it in Paul Stamets' Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms. And this little fella will come into play here in just a few minutes, so don't get too distracted by that. But it intrigued me when he was talking about the mass production of mycelium for direct-to-bulk inoculation. I'm still not completely there on the bulk inoculation. There are things to figure out. There are apparently certain species respond to it better, et cetera, et cetera. There's just a bunch of stuff to go into to get it consistent and quick, and that's the problem I'm running into, is it's far too slow. It's beyond even shiitake incubation time sometimes. Sometimes we can get it down to a few weeks, and I thought, if I could triple or quadruple my biomass that I'm going direct to bulk with, then maybe that would be a good way to go. So maybe I can do a bigger vessel if I am not using a magnetic stir. Maybe I can use air to tear up the mycelium, keep the mats from forming on top, and keep everything busted up and constantly moving. That's what I ended up doing, was just kind of running with very little information. I found almost nothing about it. I've heard about it being used in Asia with some information, but very limited information, mainly videos in different languages that I just have to watch and kind of see what they're doing. Also, Peter, I'm going to mess up his name. It's spelled O-E-I. Peter Oy wrote Mushroom Cultivation 4. I'm looking at it on the shelf right now. And he talks a lot more about mass liquid culture. Still not a lot about aerated. But my business partner, Ben Erickson, who you guys are familiar with, owns Man of War Manufacturing. Anyone who's bought a Thor bagger has probably spoke to Ben. If not Ben, then Bill. But Ben and I went on a tour of a fish hatchery that I used to work for, the place where I got my start in biology. And we saw them growing in 200-gallon bags and growing sterile algae culture for rotifer production to feed their fish, the live foods to feed their baby fish. And I was just enamored by this. You mean vats of bubbling ooey gooey liquid that changes colors with things inside of it, just bubbling away like a mad scientist laboratory? I had to have it. And I didn't even know what the case usage would be. I just thought maybe I can produce a lot of mycelium in it, Well, the results are in. It is insanely fast. It's actually far easier to keep clean than you might think. I say that with a huge grain of salt because I've only tested it a few times, and I highly recommend that everyone get good quality control. Get good quality control at your operation when you're doing liquid culture before get your good quality control down before getting into aerated, or at least just test it regularly, or use it on stuff that, isn't needed for your op, but would be nice to have while you play around with it. Now, when I say massive growth, I'm talking about an agar biopsy, a needle biopsy, injected. I just injected it right through the tube. This is a aeration jar that I've made. The quart jars have issues, which is why I've got it here to show you, but I simply did my needle biopsy and put my piece of tissue in the jar and had thick jelly like Mycelium within about 10 to 14 days. It's so fast. It's very usable within just a matter of days. Which leads me to believe that while stirring is nice and removing the CO2 from the liquid is nice, fresh air just can really, really improve how fast things grow, even in a vegetative state. So now, at least while they're being torn up, this worked so well that my first big test I did a nice test to see what if I just make a bunch of spawn bags with this aerated mycelium. It was already tested on plate to make sure it was clean, but within a few minutes, and I've got some video here Samantha took of my cell phone, you can see how quickly you can just squirt, 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 and then close the bags up and open 4 new ones, squirt, 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 squirt. You know, if I had a system actually designed on this, I could mass produce this stuff in a very small space. That's kind of the exciting part about it. So much so that we ended up having to do a Rocky Top spawn sale. So thank you everyone who bought us out of Rocky Top spawn. I had just put it at the bulk price, $25 for a bag, and man, that stuff went out the door in like a day. So thank you for that, because I had way more Rocky Top spawn than I could ever have possibly used, and never expected it to come out that clean and that well on a big test like this. So thank you guys for that. And that's something that I'm really liking about this method. I mean, so you can see like the liquid culture is very thick. This is King Blue. It has been used. The reason why I don't like the quart jars, I'll just show you here, is that it bubbles and kicks and spits liquid culture all the way across the top, forming like mats around the side. And I don't know if I can find one for you, but there are some larger chunks in here that came from the sidewall. I was using the vet vaccine gun for cattle that Lions Made of Denver carries specifically for liquid culture, and I think it's great. I think it's a beautiful piece of equipment. One downside for me is it gets plugged up way too easy, and this is a con that we'll get to with aerated mycelium or aerated liquid culture, which is it thickens. You got to use it so fast. If you gotta be on top of it. It's not like a set and forget, a set and store kind of method like your stir bars are most of the time. This stuff, like once you make it, you have to use it within days. So please know that this has limited case usages, and we'll get there as well. But real quick, I'm just going to go through kind of how it works. So the liquid culture simply has air injected right at the bottom, at the base of this hose. And you can use this hose. I use a syringe filter to keep my air clean, and we'll get to more to that as well. In fact, it's crazy to look at, because you can see one side is pristine and white, and the other side is blackened and quite dirty. But I'm thinking that if you wanted to mass produce one type of spawn, you can very easily do that. And if we wanted to do bulk to blocks, well, with that injector, you can just 3 or 4 times, and it's a 10 mil injector, so 10 milliliter injector, so you can inject 40-50 milliliters in seconds, as long as it's thin enough to be dispersed through this stuff, through that gun, which is what I did. I plugged mine up, and that's an expensive piece of equipment to plug up. So I ended up free pouring today's batch, which is Pathfinder spawn that we're working on, and we may have another sale if this goes really well. But the Pathfinder ended up plugging it up. So this has a case usage for that. This is what all I can really think of is just it's how fast it grows. So that's the big positive. Like, why would you do this over anything else? Like, it's like most liquid culture for me in a jar. There are liquid cultures that I sell a lot of, like King Blue. That's probably my #1 seller. No, in fact, I know it's my #1 seller on the website. Versus Agaricon, for the medicinal. It only sells the medicinal pack. I rarely go through that many. I'll sell quite a few medicinal packs, but that's only one syringe out of that 500 milliliter jar. So that's 50 syringes I got to pull before I really consider that jar dead and gone. So the limitations for me on this are going to be that you get really, really insanely fast growth, and you have to use it quickly, which means you have to have a plan for it, and not that set and forget method like you would with your lesser used liquid culture. And that leads to chunky growth, which will plug up your equipment. If you're going to free pour, I've actually got pictures in here of big chunks of mycelium that came off the sidewalls of the Pathfinder jar, and I can show you right here on screen. Those chunks are almost, it's pure mycelium. Those things will grow a ton of mycelium into that grain. It will grow in very quickly, but it's not ideal because I don't want to free pour. I don't want to open my jar. I want to be able to inject it. We've done free pouring of gallon jars and such, and it is a thing, but it's not my favorite way to go. And it does work really well, but again, something that works really well versus being easy for the employees to do is another thing. That chunky growth, while not bad for the spawn block, is hard on the infrastructure that I found so far. I'm thinking about trying a cattle drencher, which goes in the mouth. Typically, those can handle a little bit thicker liquid because they're dealing with like dewormer and things like that. I still don't think it's going to work completely for the chunkiness of the mycelium, so you really got to get to it quick, like day 3 or 4 is what I'm finding. The reason why my stuff's gotten so chunky is because, well, I've not been at working well all that much. I've been having to work around that kind of stuff. So lid design. Let's go into lid design because that's kind of the important part here. You're here to figure out how to do this, if you're wanting to try it. So just looking at this, I really simplified the lid. When I first started, I was working with stuff like this. It had 3 syringe filters, 2 hose barbs, and a self-healing injector port, and this is for a gallon jar. You don't need that. That's way too complicated. This lid is way better, and I even have an improvement over that once the parts come. Sorry, boys will get it. So anyways, it's 2 holes, each made with the Forstner bit. So if you watch my lid production video on how I make my airport lids, the Forstner bit that I have, and I'll have the link in the description, is used to make both holes. And then you have just a piece of micropose filter, just a peel and stick filter slapped over one of those, and then you're done on that one. This one I use a little bit RTV silicone, and the a 1/4 inch on both sides hose barb bulkhead, and that just goes through my lid. And then I'm gonna have a silicone hose go down. See, you can see it right there. And that silicone hose goes down to the bottom for 2 reasons. Number 1, you want it to bubble from the bottom so that it lifts everything up and keeps it kicking up. And number 2, so that when you draw from your hose, because this is a draw and injection hose, and I'll show you how you change that up. But you do both of those from the bottom, because if you're drawing for your syringes, your mycelium is on the bottom. You're going to end up with nice thick mycelium. Okay, I've been using these brass valves, 1/4 inch on both sides, brass valves from Granger. But I am switching to, I saw Agar Addicts on Instagram uses just like IV clamps, hose clamps, the external, they just put a kink in it. And I thought, my gosh, that's so simple. It's so much cheaper and it's so much easier than these brass valves. Why didn't I think of that? I'm very jealous of that man's brain sometimes. But the other side of it comes down to, once we replace this hose, this hose clamp, not hose clamp, we replace this with the hose clamp, you get up to another section here, and I'll just show you. This jar is garbage, so I'm happy to get it apart. Right now, I have a 1/4 inch barb on this side and a male Luer lock end on this side. And again, I'll have links for all of this stuff below. Then on this piece, which is going to be for your air injection, we have a female Luer lock to a 1/4 inch hose barb. And I know it seems weird to just put it back in place, but this is so you can twist this off once you get to your flow hood and twist something else on, which I'll show you. And then you have a little bit of hose, 1/4 inch barb, with another female lure lock. So this piece just looks the same on both sides. That just screws in, and now your syringe filter, that fits right on the end of an aquarium air hose. So what you're going to have is air from all I've been doing right now, and this is before I get into HEPA filtration and everything else, which I'm setting up right now, but we have an aquarium just sitting out in the lab, and it's in an area that's being HEPA filtered. The hose goes right to the end of the syringe filter. The syringe filter gets screwed in because it's got a male lure lock into a female lure lock, which then creates this little contraption which screws right onto this, and now you have a closed system. You start injecting air from that end, it'll start bubbling, and the hope is that your 0.2 micron syringe filter is keeping everything clean. Now, I want even added security, so my next step is to build a HEPA filtered box around my aquarium pump, and I'm going to oversize it so that the pump doesn't get a chance to overheat. I want tons of airflow going through that, so I want to dissipate it all the way around. And so we'll HEPA filter the air. It'll then go through the pump, and then it'll go through a syringe filter to keep it even cleaner. But so far, everything's been staying clean with just syringe filters, so it's probably unnecessary, but I like redundancy. So, and most of you mushroom farmers are also going to love redundancy, so let's stay redundant, shall we? Now, that's my lid design. When it comes to the vet gun, and you guys will see it, I'll just twist this end off, and I twist the end. I've got a little hose barb and a lure lock on the end of that vaccine gun hose, and it just goes right into this. So when I want to use the vaccine gun, I put it in a unicorn bag with a little bit of water, and the hose and that bit, and I just seal it, and then I cook it for about 30 minutes at 15 psi. Pull it out. Bring this over, unplug this, bring it over to the HEPA filter, unscrew it, screw the vet gun on, and there you go. You're ready to start just blasting liquid culture into bags. So it's very easy to keep up with, and the design will be even simpler than what it's been. And if you ever need to inject anything, the easiest thing, especially if you've got that hose clamp down there, would be to twist this off, screw a syringe on, because a syringe will screw onto there, and inject. If you've got a biopsy, you can inject a biopsy. You can even put a needle down in that hose and squirt it down there. You can take another liquid culture, screw the syringe on, and inject that. So it's very, very easy to use. And once you plug the air up, it pushes all of that back into the jar. Very easy to use. It's brain dead simple. And one of the things I was thinking about is stir plates are expensive. So if you're starting to use a lot of jars, then you'll understand that stir bars and stir plates get expensive, and having to constantly change them out is kind of difficult. If you take this, you can put a manifold. You can buy a aquarium pump with a manifold. It costs about $40 on Amazon, and you run a bunch of jars, 6 or more, off of a single $40 air pump. And these lids are reusable. I reuse them quite a bit. I don't use the micropose. I just peel that off and slap another one on. But those bulkheads stay reusable for a long time. And as long as you don't twist your lid when you're pulling it off, it stays good. So my thoughts is the aerated liquid culture is even cheaper to run than liquid culture typically is. Now you are paying for the electricity running constantly. But an interesting thing is your mycelium slows way down in growing in the aerated once it runs out of food. So something I've done is I have done twice as much sugar. I do, instead of 10 grams of liquid culture premix in 500 milliliters, I do 20, right? In a 500 milliliter jar. That was my phone. And the 20 allows it to get really, really thick. If I go back down to 10, which I'm going to try, it may leave the liquid culture a little thinner, a little easier to use. That said, if I want to make it even thicker, like a jar of pure mycelium, I could probably add more sugar to it, which is more carbon to grow. Because even though it's getting air, it does need an energy source. And once it runs out of sugar, it's out of that energy source. And it's like it can still grow, it just grows much, much slower. So that's another interesting thing. Now, is it worth doing? If you're just doing a few liquid cultures, or you're literally just using liquid culture to make spawn, to make 100 blocks or so a week, you probably don't need it. Heck, I sell liquid culture for a living now, and I still don't think I need liquid culture. But where I'm trying for liquid culture straight to bulk block inoculation, and I can speed up my spawn runs by tripling my liquid culture injection, like by going from 10 mils to 30 mils. I know I can do even better going even harder on this. So that's why, one of the reasons why I'm running this and playing with this. Plus, it's just been kind of fun, and I get bored. So it's a very limited case usage. It's only if you need a lot of mycelium really fast. And my thought is I could, if I'm running bulk blocks, I could run, you know, let's say each half-gallon jar is holding 1,000 milliliters. You know, I could put that into 20 blocks. And that's a lot of high full extensions, because you got to think that stuff's constantly being shredded. You can free pour it. You can inject it. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. However it goes, I can replace those jars once a week and have tons of mycelium running. I would make a little extra, and again, I would be redundant with things, because if you're relying on that and something goes wrong, where we all don't really know this technique well, then you want something redundant. So some spawn in the refrigerator or some other liquid cultures that you're ready to go with. But I'm highly interested in seeing you guys try this and seeing what other people do with this. It's a very simple technique. And again, I didn't make it up. I just kind of had to figure things out based on what I saw other people doing. But I'd heard about it from Paul Stamets's book. But yeah, I'm kind of in love with this, partly because of how beautiful it constantly looks. Plus, I took some slow motion footage for you guys, so enjoy that. Or at least I hope you've enjoyed it through the video, because it's been wigging me out watching it while I'm taking it. Well, guys, that's really pretty much it. I can't think of anything else to go with that. Please leave your questions down below. Everybody, you know, if you want to get on the Discord, go support us on Patreon. Like I said, you can support us for as low as $3. You can limit it to $3. Like, it'd be $3 per video is what you click on, and then you can say, hey, I don't want to pay more than for one video. And while I certainly would love your support over other videos, that's the way to get into the Discord. And then you can converse with us guys all the time, and you know, hang out with us on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern for our Discord talks, which are usually pretty informal. I usually just give an update of what's going on and in my life and my op, and then we'll talk about stuff, and we'll talk mushrooms most of the time, and then usually it devolves into some sort of crazy conversation in one direction or another, and we end up just kind of hanging out and having a good time. Grow Rune hats are on the website in the Mossy merch section. Please check that out. Support Samantha's work and design. She's got some t-shirts on there and some other stuff. She's got a lot more things coming up soon. And with that, y'all, keep spawning culture.